Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS, and today I'm going to give you my review for the 2023 film Late Night with the Devil, starring David Desmalchian as a TV talk show host by the name of Jack Delroy, who is planning on giving a ratings boosted Halloween special of his late night talk show Night Owls. And what this particular talk show is it's basically kind of like a mishmash of all these different talk show ideas. It's the talk show coupled with the in-house band gimmick and a couple of celebrity singers, and there's also a little bit of sketch comedy as well, so it's like a mishmash of all these different things. But one of the biggest struggles that Mr. Delroy has had to deal with throughout his career as a talk show host is he's had quite the bit of success. It goes very successfully at first, but one thing is getting in his way, and that's the talk show, the Johnny Carson show, and he just simply boosts everything in terms of ratings in regards to, popularity and in regards to notoriety. So he kind of feels like he's being left in the bottom corner almost, and he's almost forgotten. So he tries to put everything he can into the show. He tries all sorts of different gimmicks, and then eventually he does everything he can, and then eventually it's revealed that he is quite successful again. But then tragedy strikes when his wife, Madeline, is diagnosed with lung cancer, and he even does a very special show dedicated to her at one point in this flashback narrative that takes place, that's also voiced by Michael Ironside. And I really do like that aspect because it does tie into something that I have a bit of a theory about later on. But what I really think is interesting is that this particular setup is very interesting because you really do start to see a little bit of a hidden narrative take place within the execution of this backstory, this epilogue backstory, because when she dies, Jack Delroy goes into hiding for a little bit. He goes on a bit of a hiatus, and then after a few months, he comes back and he decides to get back on the horse, and he decides to, for one last hurrah, he decides to do this Halloween special where he pulls out all the stops, and he plans on doing a special involving the occult, because this is the 1970s, the mid-1970s, and this is when Satanic Panic took place, and everyone was sort of, worried about witchcraft, and the devil, and the hippie movement was happening at that point, and the Manson family was, a big thing as well. So there was a lot of paranoia about cults and devil worship. So Jack Delroy, in a little bit of naive optimism, decides to kind of jump on this bandwagon. So when he does actually do his special on the 6th season of his show, he doesn't know where he's going to go with it. And there's various different things that happen throughout the course of this evening. And what I really like about this particular film at first, the big technical stuff out of the way first, is it's shot in a very interesting way where it almost feels like, if you guys are familiar with the show, a lot of people probably watch my show because of the Inside Number 9 stuff, and in that particular instance there's an episode of that show called The Devil of Christmas, and that particular episode, is a wonderful homage to 70s television in Britain. Stuff like, Armchair Thriller, Tales of the Unexpected, etc. And that one is done in a very interesting visual style where it feels very grainy, and it does feel like a film or a TV show that was shot in the 70s. And this particular film has that very same vibe where it looks like a talk show that was shot in the 70s. And it does give you that sort of flavour of the 70s style. And I like the fact that they have two sections of this narrative. One section is the live stuff, the stuff that's being broadcasted, and that's done in really vibrant Technicolor. And then when you get to the behind the scenes stuff, it's done in almost like this black and white sepia tone style. And I've never seen such a beautiful usage of colour and black and white to make these two distinctions so brilliantly since American History X. I think the way they used that in that film was very well done and very genius in my opinion. But what I really like about this particular film is it's an escalation that is coming, but you kind of almost enjoy it when it unravels, because you really do kind of want to know more about this backstory that when the devil eventually shows up, spoiler alert, that he hints at. Like when a character who comes into the fold, a little girl named Ellie, who survived a cult, comes onto the show claiming that she is possessed. When she is summoned, or when the creature that's possessing her is summoned, he says the words, "Oh, hi, Jack." it's been a long time. Me and you go back a long way, don't we, Mr. Delroy, and things like that. So you really do get this impression that they know each other. There is a bit of a backstory here. And I really do like that. I like the myth making, and I like the world building of this particular film more so than the devil stuff, the possession stuff and the devil stuff on the whole. Yes, it's well done, and I feel like it's one of the most well done possession scenes that I've seen in a while. But what I think is very interesting is the stuff around the possession stuff is much more interesting, because they do a very good job of building this world and these characters, that it feels very kind of, it almost feels like a massive shock, even though you know the big dropping of the ball, or the pulling out of all the stops, and the big, the big chaos at the end, the final shebang where everything goes wrong. Even though you know it's coming, you still feel shocked when it does happen, because a lot of people who you have gotten to know throughout the course of this film do end up just dropping to the floor dead in these very kind of horrific ways, and it really does feel like they really do push that to for everything it's worth, really, and it's very well done. And I really do like the fact that every single character has like their own different way of looking at the world. You have a skeptic who used to be a magician, but now he sort of works to debunk supernatural occurrences. He's kind of portrayed with a little bit of a grandiose, like, oh, I know how you did this kind of thing. He almost feels like a very kind of cocksure of himself kind of guy who has his arms folded all the time, is often shaking his head whenever someone explains paranormal phenomena. He's a great character, and he was a lot of fun. But he does have a little problem with him that I do think I need to bring up later on in the video, because I do think there is a couple of issues with this film. Well, it's not really issues, but it's more like one big nitpick that I have with this film is when it comes to the other characters that isn't Jack Delroy, they do kind of feel a little bit one note. Like the character who is a medium who turns out to have these actual abilities, and he actually senses a very deadly or dangerous signal, and he starts vomiting projectile black sludge at the skeptic. He's a guy who I felt was very one note, and the paranormal investigator who may or may not have had a past with Jack Delroy, who is looking after this girl named Ellie, and who has written a book called Conversations with the Devil, in which basically is the springboard that allows Jack Delroy to get her and Ellie on the show. That character kind of just felt like, oh, she was just a prop, and she didn't really feel like she had much to her outside of being this character who is just like the carer of the person who gets possessed. That's all she kind of came across to me as, and I really do think it's a shame, because the actress who plays her and all these other characters, all these other actors do a very good job in their roles, but I feel like the roles that they're given aren't really that much in terms of depth. And a lot of people could say that's kind of meant to be the point of like a 70s talk show. You're not meant to sort of, get a lot of depth out of them. Like The Skeptic, for example, in Red Letter Media's review of this film in Half of the Bag, Mike said, in defense of it, him going like, oh, I know how you did this. You were using hypnosis, and you were basically influencing the people. You used certain keywords and things like that, blah, 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 blah. And he was acting very extravagant, almost like he was doing a pantomime. It really did feel like that. But what I think is very interesting is that Mike says, well, there were a lot of people who were like that back in the 70s when it came to TV shows, because they thought it was this next big thing. It was almost akin to theatre. So I am going to let The Skeptic off a little bit, but I feel like even though it is of the period, how people would have reacted when it came to television, that's almost like a pantomime, the talk show, I still feel like that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to add backstory and add depth. But what I think the backstory of that character does is it actually kind of fleshes out that character a little bit more, because when you look at the real life inspiration for this character, this skeptic character, he's actually based off of a real life skeptic who used to be a magician, and he's now someone who now debunks paranormal investigations. He was famous. He's a guy called the Amazing Randy, and he basically is a guy who used to help debunk religious scam artists, and basically try to put a pin in these very terrible people who basically were scamming people out of their hard-earned money just so that they could cash in on the whole oh, I speak through Jesus, or I speak through the Lord kind of characters, the people who touch other people and go, heal this lost soul and things like that, those very crazy people with the microphones and the cheap suits and the and the very cheesy, organ music and things like that. It really does give you that sort of impression. So when you look at his real life inspiration, you could connect the dots. But what I think is very interesting is, I'm actually going to say this right now, I hope that when this film is finished doing its circuit in theatres, I hope it gets a DVD release, because I think there's so much material for special features and additional content to really flesh out the backstories and really give us a little bit more insight into these characters and this world. And I feel like that's something that could very easily be given a little bit more depth. But on the whole, I really did like this film. It was very entertaining. David Desmolchan's performance is absolutely incredible. This definitely is a good film, and I definitely do think it's great and it's well done. And it has an ending that definitely does, feel like it's something that was really up my street. That ending was just really wonderful. And I don't know about you, but I really do love weird stuff. I really do. I love David Lynch. I love all different kinds of films, but I do love the weird stuff even more. And I think when this film went full weird and it went really trippy, I really loved it. And I really loved the creativity. And I loved how it seemed to have confirmed a lot of suspicions that I had, that Jack Delaney did have a little bit of a past with this cult, this Grove cult, who were basically making him sacrifices. When he basically was making this deal, he ended up selling his soul over to the devil or some sort of demonic force, and he ended up at some point sacrificing his wife for the greater good. And in a certain degree, it's actually really wonderfully, it wonderfully works out for the devil, but in many cases it almost works out for Jack as well. But in many cases, having it work out for Jack doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be happy by the end of it, because by the end of it he ends up getting the show that he wanted, but at the price of losing everyone that he knows, everyone that he's ever loved. His wife, his colleagues, various other people in his field have also, died on this show. Various cameramen and camerawomen who have actually, dedicated their lives to working on this show have now died because of this experiment. And it really does kind of go to show that the price for your dreams and your hidden desires is sometimes paved with many, many bodies. And that's something that that's a lesson that Jack Delroy had to learn the hard way. And I really did think this film was fabulous. I really do think that if it does, I'm actually praying right now, I hope this film gets a DVD release, because honestly, that's one of the things that I really love about physical media. Like, when I go to my local DVD shop, CX, I like to browse the DVDs. I like to look at the DVDs, I like to look at the back of DVDs, I like to look at the box sets. All the DVDs in that shop are of various different forms of quality. Sometimes you'll have classic films, sometimes you'll have avant-garde films, sometimes you'll have, very art-housey films, sometimes you'll have action blockbusters. But I love looking at those DVDs because you really do find a lot of interesting things to say and talk about when it comes to, looking at DVDs and looking at the back of DVDs and seeing special features. That's something that I always enjoy in terms of my overall impression of certain films. And sometimes that's me enjoying the content almost a second time. If I went to go and see a film at the cinema, I like going back and checking the DVDs. I like looking at the DVDs. I can spend hours when I'm watching a film on DVD just looking at the special features. That's the sort of person that I am, and I just really love looking at the special features of DVDs. And as much as I love streaming services, and I love, the thought of, browsing a good streaming service platform like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus, I do feel like there's something lost when you are going through those particular areas, because even though you have documentaries like Behind Stranger Things or Beyond Stranger Things, which is a Netflix documentary, making of documentary of Stranger Things, even though you have those, they don't really they're not a substitute for a good DVD special features menu. And that's something that I really do think, I hope that we get a physical media version of this story so that we can really flesh out certain behind the scenes aspects, because I really want to see the making of this film and how it all came to be, because there's so many interesting things here, and I just feel like there should have been more. And in regards to the character of the paranormal investigator, to go on another tangent before I wrap up, I wish this character had a bit of a backstory where she was a woman of science, like general science, but then an event happened to her that made her kind of want to go into the paranormal and investigate the paranormal. Or I wish she had a backstory where she was very heavily religious in the beginning. She grew up in a very heavily religious household, but then something happened in her childhood or something happened in her teen years which required her to leave the church, and then she ended up dedicating her life to science, almost like as an ultimate, stepping away from her past, stepping away from her troubles. And then all of a sudden it's almost like, her being a paranormal investigator came about through her seeing what this child Ellie went through, and this kind of brings her back to her spirituality by becoming a paranormal investigator, almost like a Dan Brown sort of like arc, where he still is tackling the religion that he grew up with, Catholicism and Christianity, and he basically is going back to those religions, the religions that he grew up with, in the Dan Brown, Robert Langdon novels. And I really do wish that was kind of the backstory for the paranormal investigator character, because I really do feel like you could have done so many more things with this, and in many cases it still is a good film. I'm not saying it isn't, but I feel like that's one of those things that really kind of sells this film short to me, is it really could have re-pushed certain characters. And I don't know about you, but the guy who's in charge of the band, who has the devil horns, and he has that monitor thing that makes those weird sounds, the guy with the bald head and the moustache, I really felt sorry for his character, so that when he ends up, spoiler alert, kicking the bucket in one scene, I actually was very heartbroken, because he went to his grave not really getting the recognition or the validation from his friend Jack Delaney, who's helped all these years. And he just kind of dies not really knowing what happened there. And I really do think that's quite sad. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film. This film was a 5-star film for me. I really enjoyed it. And let me know what you guys thought of Late Night with the Devil down in the comments. Did you enjoy it? Did you have the same issues with it that I had? Let me know your thoughts. And let me know what you think of this video down in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos, please be sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified about my latest videos. And if you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. So that's been me with my review for Late Night with the Devil. I hope you're all having a very good day. This has been Joshua from WHIMS Be Careful Musings. Take care, bye for now.